Namaskar and welcome to one more episode of What Does This Data Say? I am Ajay Prakash. There is so much happening around us that I really don't know where to start and show you a lot of interesting data. We on the top of the list, of course, is the Adani Gate, and then we have a couple of people who have come out on bail. Kappan Siddiqui, after spending almost 26 months in jail, the reluctant UP government finally released him. He walked a free man and went back to his home state. And then we have the case of Shankar Mishra, referred to as Mr. P-Gate, who, while in flight in a Air India business class, stood in the alley and peed on a woman who was sitting on a window seat. Well, those are the allegations. He's, he has been granted bail 3 days ago. And then there was the grand finale of the Indian budget. And whenever a budget is presented, each and every Indian has a comment to make. The best comments always comes from our politicians. If you follow Twitter, then Smriti Irani in a tweet mentioned that this budget is a result of 8 years of penance of Mr. Narendra Modi. 8 साल की तपस्या का फल है. I remember two lines of a hymn in praise of the Lord. Praise to the Lord, the Almighty, the King of creations. O my soul, praise him, for he is thy health and salvation. Now, today's program is not going to be an analysis of the budget. I'm going to bring out some data which is rather disturbing, and it's important that all of you know about it. No one in the media nor in the social media are talking about this, and our youngsters are suffering the most. In this episode today, I am going to give you some data regarding the massive layoffs that are happening in our IT and services industry. It's become a daily affair. Sometimes you'll find Wipro is laying off people, sometimes Infosys, sometimes TCS, sometimes Amazon. In fact, it's become so routine that people now just don't even think about it. And there has not been a single news about this on the mainstream media and neither on the social media. Now, let me tell you, when one person in India loses his or her job, there are four others in his or her family who are affected. In the economic survey this year, Venkateshwaran, our chief economic advisor, said that we may grow from anywhere between 6 to 6.8%. However, the same evening in a press briefing, he said our growth will be closer to 6%. I'll talk about the growth a little later in this program. However, one thing to note is he said to increase jobs in India, we need to increase the private capex. Now, in the last episode, I had shown that for years in our country, the percentage spent by the private sector and the percentage spent on investment has remained rather stagnant. So it's quite unlikely that the job opportunities are going to go up in the coming years. And regarding the GDP growth, Nirmala Sitharamanji was even more optimistic. She said we are going to grow by 7%. I'll just quickly show you where we stand today. If you look at the quarter on quarter growth for this year, in Q1, our growth was 13.5% because the previous year was a recovery year from the corona. In quarter 2, we saw a growth of 6.3%. Now, Q3 results have just now come in and our growth is down to 4.2%, and the projected growth for the last quarter is 4%. It's not going to be at all easy for the Modi government to show a 7% growth this year. Remember, Raghuram Rajan had also mentioned that we will struggle to maintain a 5% growth rate.
Hello there. Just pause for a moment and think about the difference between information and news. Information comes from data, and it's all about numbers. Researchers analyze these numbers and present them to you as authentic, genuine information. On the other hand, the news is just an opinion, and opinions can be manipulative. The only way you can recognize propaganda and fake news is by looking at the data. So keep watching. Information, not news.
This was just to set the background that if someone says everything will be okay this year or we are going to grow so jobs will be back, this is just to counter that no, we are not really going to grow that fast. We are going to struggle and there will be a pressure on job creation. Now, before I start showing you the numbers for the layoffs, I'll just show you some data points for our country. The reason I'm showing you this is that when I talk of numbers, you can place them in the right context. Generation Z, that is people born between 1997 and 2012, whose ages today are between 11 and 26 years, are 52% of our population, that is 73 crores. Senior citizens are 25 crores. Working group population, defined as persons between 15 to 64 years, are 94 crores. The number of pensioners in India is 9 crores. These include all kind of pensioners, state, central, old age, widow, etc. Then we have people below the poverty line, 35 crores. This figure has gone up after the pandemic. Voters in India, 92 crores. The unemployment rate today stands at 7.1%. In urban areas, 8.6%. There are about 10 crore unemployed youth today. Now, what I want to show you is that the slowdown in the IT sector is not a recent phenomena. It is not because of a slowdown in the US, which has happened only a couple of years ago. This slowdown is a result of the policies of our government post 2014. Have a careful look at these graphs. The first graph I am showing you here is the number of people employed in the IT services sector from 2009 onwards. In 2009, we had 19.6 lakh people, went up to 32.9 by 2014. The CAGR, the average growth rate during this period, was 11%. There were 38.6 lakh employees in 2017, 45 lakhs in 2021, last year 48.5 lakh, and in 2023 there are a little over 50 lakh employees. The average growth rate from 2014 till 2022 of employment in this sector was 5%. On the same graph, now I superimpose the figures of employees added each year. For instance, in 2010, 3.4 lakh new employees were added. Similarly, in 2011, another 2 lakh. 2012, 3 lakh. So there was a kind of a zigzag pattern. This is known as alternate year hiring, and this kind of pattern continued till 2014. The thing to observe here is that post 2012, the hiring in this sector has continuously declined. The minimum number were hired in 2018, that is only 1.1 lakh people. Thereafter, there was a little bit increase. I'll come back to this hiring during the pandemic, which is another sad story in itself. More than 50,000 Indian students graduate every year with engineering degrees. Even after thousands of layoffs and uncertainty of jobs in the market, it is not restricting the younger generation Z who still want to join the tech industries. In the recent Mood of the Nation survey done by the India Today group, it was noticed that 70% of our youth are concerned about job losses and new employment. So, lesser jobs and more people, there is going to be a severe pressure on hiring on the IT companies. The IT and the services sector can be very clearly divided into two different segments. One is the startup segments, the startup companies of India, which at one time were a sunshine industry and the pride of India. The other are the regular big IT major companies like Wipro, TCS, Infosys, etc. I will first tell you what is going on in the startup side of this industry. According to the website Inc. 42, around 58,000 startups have been launched till date in our country. The maximum that were launched was in the year 2015, more than 8,000. And if you look at this graph again very carefully, you will see how there's a strong declining trend of launching new startups. Last year, in fact, in 2022, we saw the least number of startups coming up, only 652. This data compiled by Statista very clearly shows the distress in the SME and the startup segment. This is the self-declared cash reserves of Indian startups and SMEs as on June 2020. If you remember, the first lockdown was just being removed at that time. 38% of the companies said they are out of funds. 12% said they have less than 1 month of cash reserve. 30% had only 1 to 3 months of cash, and 16% 3 to 6 months. 4% had shut down business during the corona lockdown. So the pandemic only added to the misery of this sector. Have a closer look at the layoffs in the startup companies. This data I have compiled from the website layoffs.fyi. In 2020, 35 companies laid off 39 times, a total of 12,932 people. The capital invested in these 35 companies was more than $50 billion. Similarly, in 2021, which saw the least number of layoffs, it happened in five companies, 4,000 people, and a capital of around $7.5 billion. 2022 saw the maximum number of layoffs. More than 14,000 people were laid off, and the capital at risk was over $35 billion. 2023, it's only 1 month, and there have been already more than 2,000 layoffs in these companies, and the capital at risk is more than $13 billion. Overall, in the last 3 years, 120 companies have laid off more than 33,000 people. The capital at risk is more than 106 billion US dollars, which translates to 8,64,756 crore rupees. If you see the industry wise layoffs, the maximum layoffs have happened in the education sector in companies like Byju's or Unacademy. In fact, there was another round of layoffs in Byju's just yesterday. Then we have food delivery like Swiggy and Zomato. Third is in retail sector, mostly in online retail companies such as Meesho. Transportation, another sector which has been hit very badly, are all the transportation and courier companies who are laying off the people. The reason of these layoffs are several fold. Firstly, the lifestyle of people had changed during the corona period. We had started relying more on online deliveries. Everything was coming online, right from groceries to medicines. Suddenly, there was a surge in everything which was online, right up to food delivery. That resulted in a growth in the transportation or the courier sector. Now, as life is getting back to normal, many of us are going back to the traditional ways of running our lives. This has affected the sector. So, all the people which were hired during the corona, you had seen a peak earlier, they are being now laid off. And added to that is one more very important factor: the inflation and the price rise is hitting the middle class and the lower middle class very badly. There is no excess cash left with these people. Earlier, those people who were ordering food online have now started cooking at home. And similarly is the case with shopping as well. They really want to find out where the bargains are. Everyone is trying to conserve cash. The third most important factor is the drying up of investments and funding in the startup companies in India. This is known as the funding winter. Now, two very major companies which were earlier investing billions of dollars in startups, since last year, they have stopped funding. Many Indian startup companies were supported by SoftBank during their startup phase. SoftBank is a Japanese company. Since last year, they have withdrawn from the Indian market and now they are not investing. Another major company which was investing in startups is the US based Tiger Global. Since last year, it has cut down on funding because they ran into some other financial issues. And so far, this year in 2023, their funding has been nil in India. Now, in spite of all this data, just today our finance minister, Ms. Nirmala Sitaraman, has said that there is no funding winter as far as the startups are concerned. I only wish that touched upon the layoffs in the IT majors, which runs into several lack of people. The distress is all around in the IT sector, and the budget had no provisions to help any of these companies. I'll see you again next week with some other data. Till then, goodbye and namaskar.